I have an unconventional, I would say not so popular change specific to how we do things, but I would say addition of dark mode indirectly has improved a lot of things. So normally you just think of dark mode just being a visual change, but internally when we toggle, I would say the theme, the light and dark themes, we are actually restarting everything in that life cycle. And that actually helps developers find out a lot of these edge case bugs that happens whenever we recreate state. And it's something very unintuitive that something like that actually helps us find all these bugs in our app. For example, we had a case where if someone toggled the app's theme, a screen would show up twice, one on top of other. So one screen would be half transparent and we could see two screens at a time. And without dark mode toggling, we would have never thought of this. And the other thing I would say is, not from a developer perspective, but in general, in terms of the ecosystem, wise, the permissions are being changed. Instead of just taking a blanket permissions for everything, we're taking like very specific permissions for things. It helps both the users as well as developers to make sure that we build secure things. Instead of having blanket permissions for the entire app, we do very specific uses. And I think that's what's recommended as well, that unless you need something like location, don't make use of it. And the fact that now the platform in the background, I would say, denies permissions that haven't been used for a while. That's something I really like from the user's perspective. And other thing I feel going forward would be very useful would be scope storage, where apps can decide that we need only this specific part of the storage to use, and we don't really need the access to the entire disk, and hence we don't really have to play on the permissions game. It's better for the user as well because users are apprehensive of giving storage permission for the entire disk. Some of us blindly just click on allow every dialog box, but a lot of people are apprehensive as well. Like, do you really need access to all my files? But with something like scope storage, like it builds user confidence and it makes our lives easier as well because users are more likely to give the permissions.
Right. Yeah. Even I think many of us haven't moved to scope storage till now. Maybe just for Android 10, we have done some changes, but not for Android 11 because I think people are finding it difficult to migrate from the storage structure we had and now we will be having in future. Philip or Arnav, you want to share your the biggest updates you liked or not like anything?
Sure. I can take up some of them. I think one of them was the move towards, I think 64-bit was really good actually. So when that happened, there were a lot of libraries which actually use some native bits and they actually went through a bit of an overhaul. Incidentally, like there were a lot of problems with React Native that got improved because they were forced to get into 64-bit world, for example. So that is something that I really liked, especially for low-level libraries. That was like a, sort of Google pushing people that, okay, 32-bit we're not tolerating anymore. You have to be 64-bit only. You have to have native 64-bit support. That was something. The storage, so not just scope storage. So scope storage, if you just look at scope storage, it's like people mostly complain about the problems that they have when they're developing, but the storage the storage framework API that I feel is very transformational in nature. Now there is a very, very, very old interview, I think an article where Sundar Pichai is talking about how files will not exist in the future, and I really like that his vision was when that was the time when he was not just CEO of Alphabet, he was not even CEO of Google, he was not even managing actually Android at that time. He was just the product manager for Chrome and Google Drive at that time. This is a very long back. And his vision was that file systems as we know it, for the consumers might not exist, for developers it might. But when you go to Google Drive, you think of, okay, I have a sheet, I have a Word, I have a document, I have a sheet, I have a presentation. Today when you're using Google Drive, you still have that folder kind of thing a little bit to correspond, but you don't really have paths like you have on a desktop, right? Now, the reason is that, how we store files need not always be very file system dependent. Today, there are a lot of apps which have actually implemented the storage framework API very nicely. And if you try to share some images into it, Google Photos shows up as one of the possible places where you can share from. Then when you do Google Photos, you can actually pick up a photo which is on the cloud and you can share it on that app. Now that's something that was not possible if you do it via the old method where you could only pick photos which are on your device. Now the Google Photos, when they implement the storage framework API, or Dropbox also implements the storage framework API, so you can very transparently look at all your files which are both on the device and the cloud, and you don't really know which files are on the cloud, which files are on the device. You can just pick up any file. If it is on the cloud, on the fly, it gets downloaded and gets attached. If it is on the device, it gets immediately attached. So basically, you are sort of exposing a set of files. They could be coming from the network, they could be coming from the disk. That's really powerful, I feel, because now when you attach items and when you send something to some one app to another app, you have access to a lot more data, which is all your data. But if you only go via the file manager, you have only the data that's on your device. And as things go more cloud native, as people actually use apps like Google Photo, where partly your data is in the cloud, partly it's in the device, storage framework API is sort of really, really helpful. And the permissions, of course, I definitely think that, as developers, we can rant about it, but as developers, we also are users. It's great that the operating system is working towards protecting privacy. So I think as developers, we should take up that responsibility and not think of it as roadblocks, but think of it as safeguards and work around them and work with them.
Again, we came to security. So we're moving to another security question. So security has always been a concern for Android users, and being an Android engineer, what do you think about how the framework has evolved, and what are the best security practices you would recommend the developers to follow?
Sure. Actually, I think so. Security is generally, I think, quite misunderstood topic as well, and for young people it could be very confusing, but I think when you're starting off to build initial basic Android apps, unless you're making something where you need to protect stuff like DRM, protect streaming video like Netflix is doing, or you are making a fintech app where there are compliance based data protection things like if you want to locally store your credit card information, it has to be one way encrypted. Those kind of compliance issues are there. Before that, I would say don't try to think too much about security, but just if you don't do too much weird stuff with security, your apps are generally secure because the platforms, the frameworks actually enforce a lot of security onto you. I have seen examples and I have consulted as an advisor to a lot of apps, is that a lot of people trying to roll their own security systems actually end up making a lot of insecure things. Right? We will do our own encryption. These kind of things that people try to do, they actually try to end up doing more insecure things. Okay. I believe that one aspect where security generally takes a hit is when youngsters are learning. A lot of the learning resources, they simplify things like, we are storing passwords. And in a tutorial, it shows storing as strings because they want to skip the step of showing that it is hashed and it is stored. If people who make content and they're teaching, and I really try to do it as much as possible, is that whenever you are sort of circumventing a step which is needed for security and you're doing it for ease of use and you're showing a very simple step when you're making a beginner tutorial, you should put a small asterisk, you should put a small box there if it's written content, or if it's video content, you should just sort of take a small detour for 20 seconds and say that, okay, this is not how we do it actually in production. In production, we do XYZ. This is just for demonstrating, we're showing it. So that it's there in people's mind all the time, which is kind of, important. Otherwise, I think, REST, I think, one more thing about security I feel is don't go for overkill on the client side, because on client side it is not really possible to have any kind of bulletproof security. I feel a lot of people waste a lot of time in trying to think that, okay, what are the ways I can prevent this and that and so many things. And I used to remember that it used to be very easy for me to sort of do, if I have to just extract data from the API or something from an app, I used to run custom versions of the Android OS itself, right? So CyanogenMod kind of things, right? So at the network level, like at the IO driver level of Java itself, you can make all the API calls log the data out. So any security that you put on the app layer can be easily defeated if the OS is under the control of the user. So a lot of people try to secure the app from the user. And that's where I feel it's a defeated battle, because you can't protect the app from the user, because they are running on a platform which is the user owns. They can run on a custom operating system. They can actually change how activity.java works, right? They can log out lines, they can sort of change how onCreate works, and your app is going to be extending that onCreate function, is going to be calling that. So no need to try and sort of overprotect things at that layer, right? Just sort of follow the best practices. Don't take shortcuts for ease of use. That's it, I guess.
And I think there's one thing, like it's difficult. It's not impossible, like to reverse engineer any code you're writing on Android. It can be difficult, but again, people have NDK, or people are using like securing the keys with the code with ProGuard or anything. I think we can just reverse engineer everything which is there in the code.
So I was working on this fintech application where you had to support a few things through web views. And which when researching that, I figured out that web views can be like very vulnerable, even though they seem very simple, that you just open a web page. What more could happen? Like everything else you're taking care of the client side. But that's, I think, one of the like most forgotten parts of security, that you are loading up a web page and you can do a lot of things when opening a web page. And it's even the tooling system will warn you when you're enabling JavaScript on a web view that it can be insecure. So, I mean, I've seen a lot of apps just use web views very casually, like just randomly load up things in a web view. And that's something we should be at least a bit careful of, that when you're loading up a web page, you're bringing up a lot of the web vulnerabilities into your app as well, depending upon if you're validating your URLs or not, because someone can inject code through the URL, or when someone's loading up JavaScript. So try to use web views only in controlled environments where you know that you would be specifically opening your URLs, which you can secure, and not just any URL, sent by someone else. Like if it's some sort of a social media thing, if someone just sends you a very malicious URL and you try opening in a web view, it can potentially take over your app. So that's something I want to do, like just point out that.
Yeah, I had an experience with web view also for the security part. And again, you get that warning, but people do SSL also, like again, but SSL can be done if you wanna do on Android side. That can be done on the first screen where you have the control. In other parts, I think the front end guys who are implementing the web view thing, so I think they have to put a lot of efforts there. But yeah, that can be done, but yes, some tricks has to be implemented there.